more than I will read. And he edited or altered 10 academic volumes, including the prize-winning The Perfect Meal, and now he's focused on design of enhanced multisensory food and drink experience, I believe. To my left is Heloise Vilaseca. She's a chemical engineer specialized in the field of science and cooking. She has collaborated with the Alicia Foundation, Harvard University, and now runs the La Masia, the research and development department at El Cellar de Can Roca, that is only considered the best restaurant in the world. It was, or so if you need someone to test your food, I'm available. Even if it's radioactive, I know. So let's start for the presentation of Charles Spence, Gastrophysics, the New Science of Eating.
Okay, so I'd like to tell you a bit about some of the stuff that's in the latest book, Gastrophysics, which I want to position as a combination of gastronomy on the one side, kind of nice food we want to talk about, share, remember, maybe even take pictures of. Dishes like this, Holland and the Bee from a chef we work with, Joseph Youssef, in London, all about trying to change people's food behavior, in this case get them to eat more insects by making it beautiful to look at, beautiful to taste, and telling stories around the food. And the other part is kind of the physics, which is a bit of a debated topic, quite what the physics means, but I want to put it as psychophysics, which is kind of a branch of psychology where you systematically study people and the things that make them say what they do, what they perceive. So it's the kind of systematic food science of the front of house rather than the back, and I think we've had 3 decades just over of spumes and foams and gels and anti-griddles and rotovaps and all kinds of science in the kitchen that has taken us to some wonderful places. You may love it or not, but it's definitely changed the landscape. But no one's really been applying much scientific method to what goes on at the dining tables. And that's where I think things may start, or are already starting to change. And so we sort of do experiments as psychologists. We're not chefs, though we work with chefs. We're not designers, but we work with products that have been designed. Doing experiments in the lab in Oxford. Here we have somebody, maybe we're interested in the impact of the shape of the glass on the experience of the wine. Is it worth paying €100 for a wine glass? Will it really change the tasting experience? And if so, how? So we have somebody here, it's very well controlled, they're blindfolded, their head is clamped, the wine is agitated at a certain speed under their nose. Very scientific, but not very ecologically valid. This person is not enjoying their glass of wine. It's probably a weirdo too, it's probably a Western educated, industrialized, rich and democratic psychology student. And probably it is. Not representative of people at large. So we can show things with this group, very well controlled, but people will complain and say, well, that an undergraduate did that, wouldn't affect me in the same way. So where we can, we try and work out there in the real world, in restaurants, bars, cafes, coffee shops, cocktail bars, science festivals such as this even, and try and do experiments in the wild, and hopefully show that the same factors affect perception, performance, choice, and behavior in both places. And of course, if we do experiments in the restaurant, then people are going to complain, well, how did you control it? I mean, maybe it was sunny on the first condition day, and then it was raining on the second condition day, and how do you control all the stuff? Maybe it was somebody's birthday, that's why they gave the food a good rating, and we can't. So that's ecologically valid, but hard to control scientifically. But hopefully, by combining the two, we can kind of bat away critics from either side. And why do we need a new topic with a complicated name like gastrophysics? I think for me, kind of the example that I start the book with, which is one from Heston Blumenthal, the chef of the Fat Duck, is a dish like this, created by him and his team in Bray, a dish from a chef who was soon to become the world's top chef, a dish that he thought was seasoned perfectly, that he served some of his loyal customers when they're trying to figure out whether a new dish goes on the menu, but a dish that his diners went, "Ugh, I don't like it. It's way too salty." The world's top chef creates a dish he thinks perfectly seasoned. He serves it in his restaurant to his diners, and they say too salty. What is going on there? You will not find the answer in the ingredients necessarily, but it's all about what's going on in the mind of the person who is eating, consuming the food. And you, like the diners at the table in the Duck, on seeing this ice cream, set expectations. That is what our brains do. make predictions about food, the nutritional qualities, the energy content. Is it good for me, bad for me? Probably we think maybe red berry ice cream, probably sweet, I like it, maybe for the end of a meal. And if I had that much ice cream, I'd have to go to the gym. All of those thoughts go through each and every one of our minds in the blink of an eye. 100th of a second is all it takes for your brain to do that calculation. And then if it's a highly nutritious food, fat-dense food, we will pay attention to that food in the environment. But in this case, your predictions are wrong, because this is actually a frozen crab bisque ice cream or a smoked salmon ice cream. The colour is perfect. It is kind of a historical ice. It does have precedent in British cuisine. It's just not what you expected. So the solution in this case turned out to be, from work with the chef and Martin Yeomans in the University of Sussex, a psychologist, sort of food scientist down there, simply to call the dish something different. Food 386, for example. In fact, if the dish is placed before you and you're told by the waiter this is food 386, you don't know what to expect. Maybe it's the food that Tim Peake or the astronauts take up into space or something. You don't know what to expect. You can withhold your expectations, and then when you taste this dish, it will taste perfectly seasoned. It will taste as it did in the chef's mind. So simply by knowing the expectations of your diners, you can, and then guiding the diner through the experience where necessary, turn something that's badly seasoned to a perfectly seasoned dish. And it's examples like this that maybe come out more from modernist cuisine, when you can pull all the elements of food apart and put them back together in weird and wonderful ways. That leads me and some of the chefs that we work with to think that the pleasures of the table reside mainly up here in the mind, not really down here in the mouth. Because it's your mind where the sight of food, where the sound of food, where the smell of food, where the taste, the texture, the pain, the expectations, your emotion, that's where it all comes together up here, not in your mouth. And that illusion that we have that we taste in here is kind of just a trick of the mind in a way, giving us something we feel the food tastes in here, but it's really up there. I guess for us what we try and do is work with chefs where we can, sharing any insights that we come across from our colleagues in psychology and neuroscience, and try and use that as a constraint maybe for a dish creation, and try and do experiments that can switch between the restaurant and the lab, online, and who knows where else. So this is one example from Chef Joseph Youssef, a young chef in charge of kitchen theory in London, and his synesthesia menu. And you see him preparing the amuse-bouche, bittersweet, salty, and sour. It comes to the dining table in some random order, placed down before each and every diner. And the waitress will say, this is the amuse-bouche, the 4 tastes. The chef recommends you start with the salty, then have the bitter, then taste the sour one, and make sure you end on a sweet note. And then off she wanders, and the diner's left going, but you didn't tell me which one was. And that's the point of the dish, that diners have to rearrange their spoons into the order they think is correct. Salty on the left, then bitter, then sour, then sweet. The waitress or waiter can then measure, make a little note of how the diners arrange their spoons. That becomes data that feeds into a paper that can be backed up by online research. If you get it right, well, right's not really quite the right word. If you get the consensual answer, if you can read the chef's mind, then you'll have a better tasting experience as a result. You will not have that disconfirmation of expectation. And in fact, I've arranged them for you in the consensual response. 70% of people will say white is salty, browny black is bitter, green is sour, red is sweet. I can make that number go up to about 100% if I put those espherified balls of taste on different coloured spoons. If the white ball was on a blue spoon, that makes it twice as salty. If the brown one was on a purple spoon, so on and so forth. But the idea is to get conversation at the table. Because if everyone agreed, people think, well, what's this dish about? What's the interest? And it's a very act of inducing conversation and collecting data in a naturalistic way, where your diners don't feel like they're filling out forms or really taking part in an experiment. Maybe, as we heard this morning, in a playful way. That is kind of a nice place we like to be in experimentally with the chef. And I'll give you another example later, if I have time, where we're looking for other naturalistic diner responses as a kind of dependent measure in our research. So being not chefs, we kind of are interested in everything else that surrounds the food and drink. Your moods, the emotions, the storytelling, the theatre, the magic, the multisensoriality of the places and spaces where we eat and drink. But after years of doing the research, showing that the shape of the glass, the texture of the glass will change the taste of the wine. The colour of the glass most certainly will. After doing all that research, publishing it, showing significance bars in scientific papers that no one ever reads, people kind of say, yeah, good, and they ignore it because it doesn't feel like that to them. In fact, it doesn't feel like that to any of us. We all think we can just taste what is in the glass, and we can really taste what's in the glass, and we wouldn't be affected by the softness of the chair, the seagulls in the background, anything like that. So that's kind of the problem, and I think this is why I kind of come to this idea of the Provençal rosé paradox, because I think most of us, food critic, chef, psychologist, regular consumer alike, we all think we can really just taste the food or the drink. But at the same time, we also hold the belief that when we go on holiday, especially as Northern Europeans, to come down to the Mediterranean, food and drink tastes wonderful, and you may have that rosé wine that tastes so wonderful, you're tempted to buy a bottle or a case and take it back home with you to share with your friends on a cold winter's night and say, what a great taste, what a wonderful holiday, here are my pictures, I got this wine, you wouldn't believe, only €1 a bottle. And then it tastes like €1 a bottle wine should. And you think, what changed? Did the wine get too cold in the airplane? I think not. I think the wine is exactly the same. It's the atmosphere, the experience, the mood and the emotion that have changed. And everyone, wherever we come from in the world, has a version of that. I have Taiwanese students who say, tea, it tastes great in England, we take it back home to our families in Taiwan, and it's different. I think it's all about the mood, the emotion. So you maybe, on a holiday, you're probably with your family, you're probably relaxed, you're hopefully in a good mood, and all of these things, I think, can affect the taste of the food. This is something that Denis Martin here, chef of the 2 Michelin star namesake restaurant in Vevey in Switzerland, has picked up on and kind of designed for intuitively. So he realized with his restaurant between Nestle headquarters and Charlie Chaplin's final home on the shore of the lake, that he'd get lots of suits on account coming to his restaurant. His words, not mine. Swiss, stiff, formal businessmen from Nestle headquarters. And he could kind of tell from the way their suits were buttoned up and their face when they walked through the door, with a stiff, formal face like that, they weren't going to enjoy his food as much as he thought that they should, given the effort, the passion, the seasoning, the seasonality and everything else that went into his food. So for him, he came up with this sort of what I think is a wonderful solution. It's kind of the mental palate cleanser. Because if the pleasures of the table reside in the mind, not the mouth, why would you ever think about cleansing the palate? Seems to me the least interesting part of flavour experiences. And what was that acidic sorbet meant to do anyway, exactly? What you really want is a mental palate cleanser, something that gets you into the right mood, because that will, I guarantee it, make the food taste better. So you go for the single sitting, 30 covers, thereabouts. At around 7 o'clock, everyone turns up, some a few minutes early, some a few minutes late. And there's nothing on the tables, no cutlery, no glassware. Just one of these cows sitting centre stage in the middle of each and every table, and nothing happens. So I think, 7:05 now, I'm sure the first dish will be coming out any time now, but nothing will happen until somebody curious as to whether this is a Swiss salt and pepper shaker, maybe twist the cow, and you get the pepper. We'll pick it up, tilt it underneath to see what's on the underside, and they go, meh. Mooing of a Swiss €1 cheap toy, plastic toy. But it will get people to laugh. It does that night after night. And within a few moments, you can guarantee every table will have their cow in the air. You have a community of mooing cows, a room full of laughing diners. The mood has been elevated. This is your mental palate cleanser, and that is when the first dish comes out. And I see a number of other chefs, the CIA in New York have, jokes cards on the tables for all those couples who've been married for a decade or two too long, who come into the restaurant and have nothing to say. Anything that will just help break the ice will improve the taste of the food. And there are various versions of this, but I think that's part of the Provençal rosé thing, thinking about the mind of your diner. And the other part is this, kind of is the smells, the sights, the sounds of the sea. I think that plays into our experience. We never eat nowhere, we always eat somewhere, and the context always affects us. And it was with that idea in mind, and not enough time to plan an experiment. Heston Blumenthal and myself did a study in Oxford at an event like this for 150 guests. We paid some money to have some of the top chefs' food, and we hadn't got anything ready, and 2 days before we said, what can we give people? How can we turn this into an experiment? Oh, well, let's just play the sounds of the sea, and we'll give people oysters and see what happens. Half the people got to eat the oyster while listening to the sounds of the sea. Half of the people got to eat the oyster while listening to farmyard chickens. And those who ate the oyster with the sounds of the sea rated the oyster as tasting significantly better, but no more salty. That was kind of the science part, and that then led in from the fat duck team into the dish that looks like the sea, and that has the sounds of the sea we could just about hear up there coming out of the beautifully designed conch shell. A dish that's been the signature dish for a decade now, that's still on the menu today, that you can think of as one of the first examples, I think, of technology being brought to the dining table. And when this happened, we sort of thought, wow, we must be the first to demonstrate that having the appropriate sounds helps, especially if your restaurant is in Bray, which is about as far from the coast as you can get in England, on the outskirts of Slough, really. So you need all that atmosphere to try and make the seafood taste its best. But we weren't the first, of course. You're never the first at anything, really. But it's the Italian futurists, people like F.T. Marinetti and his ilk from the Futurist Cookbook, that is packed with, I think, pretty much everything you find in modernist cuisine today. The early versions of the rotovap, things like that, technology to change the presentation of food. Eating with our hands rather than cutlets in there. Syntactilismo, feeling textures to change the taste of food, it's in there. Atomized sprays over the table, it's in there. And they were serving their Italian colleagues frogs' legs while listening to the sound of croaking frogs, 1930 in Milan. All been done before. But I think there's a big change between 1930 and 20-something in that you would never want to eat the futurists' food. It was horrible from any description. Ball bearings and perfume sprayed in your face. What's changed today is that the best chefs, I think, who are interested in the total experience, who are building on some of the scientific insights and using their culinary and artistic creativity to make dishes that do taste wonderful, and they're doing everything they can on the plate, but realize the total experience goes beyond the plate to off-the-plate dining, to the whole room kind of dining, as we see here from French chef Paul Perret in Ultraviolet in Shanghai, serving his fish and chips inspired dish, because he used to live in England before he was famous, and once, as he was becoming famous, saw his name on the wrapping paper of some fish and chips in a store and said, that's me. So it stayed with him, and he wanted to sort of do a homage to that in a way. So here you have the fish and chips, which we thought was English, but I guess it's really Venetian, but anyway. We thought it was English. It's a stuffed caperberry. No worries, because you've got 19 more courses to come, so you won't go away hungry. And it comes out from the kitchens with the sounds of the sea, again, followed by the sounds of the Beatles, quintessentially British group, with the British flag on the table, and the British weather projected onto the walls. Everything we think about Britain captured there. Great tasting dish on the plate, but also it's a total experience that matters. And from his protege, some would say, Paco Roncero, in Sublimotion Ultraviolet, I always get them the wrong way around, either Sublimotion or Ultraviolet, in the Hard Rock Hotel in Ibiza. 4 rooms from a 20-something course menu. You can see how the lighting changes, the visuals change, the sounds change, the smell might change, the temperature might change, the waiters' outfits might change course to course, all designed to tell stories around the food and hopefully enhance the taste. I'm sure they're doing it intuitively, they're doing it brilliantly. I really do believe the same food would taste significantly different in those 4 rooms. But I can't test it, because I'd need, I reckon, from a power analysis, about 60 to 80 diners to show a significant effect. And at €1,500 a head, that is, I don't know, €250,000, and my department in Oxford is never going to pay that kind of subject fees to answer the questions. We can't do it. The chefs are intuitively in the space, but we can't measure it. So what do we do instead? We try and look for another venue, and this is kind of experiential events, often funded, built around branded products, such as this one was, from November 2013, 2012, in Soho in London. 500 people over 3 nights, taken through 3 rooms you see here. You get a glass of whiskey, a scorecard, and a pencil. You start you off in the room at the top, up here. We've got the English summer sounds, birds, the baaing of the sheep, the mowing of the lawn, deck chairs, croquet hoops, grass on the floor, everything about the English summer. And we asked you, tell me on the scorecard how grassy on the nose is the whiskey, how sweet to taste, how textured the aftertaste, how much do you like the decorations, and how much do you like the whiskey right now. Then take your whiskey, your scorecard, and your pencil downstairs into the suite room, where everything's pinkish red because that's the colour of sweetness. Everything is round because round is sweet. Other tastes are associated with angular shapes. We have tinkling high-pitched sounds because we've done the research online and in the lab to show those enhanced sweetness. And we ask people again, tell me about the nose of the whiskey, the taste, the aftertaste, the decorations, and your liking. And then finally into the woody room. Wood on the walls, wood on the floor, dead tree behind you, double bass, creaking wood doors, log fire, anything else one can think of that might remind you of wood. And again, tell me about the whiskey, tell me about the decorations, tell me about how much you like the thing. And what you get from that, and many other events like it now, going up to numbers of 3,500 people tested, is that the environment, the context does change the experience, what people say. So here we see in the grassy room, people rated the grassiness on the nose about 10% higher. In the sweet room, we brought out sweetness as anticipated, and in the woody room, we increased the texture, the aftertaste, and that was the room that people most liked the whiskey in. And some of the chefs who were there then went away to their restaurants in the north of England and started serving the whiskey from a wooden tray to try and capture a bit of that contextual effect. And I want to position this as kind of experiential event, kind of multi-sensory, very much off the plate or out of the glass. And it's kind of the Provençal rosé moment kind of condensed into a 15-minute experience. And a few people said, well, we knew what you were up to. Of course you wanted us to say it was grassier on the nose in the grassy room. What else? We're not stupid. So we did the opposite. You still did something. You never put your numbers all in a line all the way down in each room. You were affected. And if we averaged 500 and something participants, the majority were swayed in the direction anticipated. So I think that makes the atmosphere really does matter, and you can enhance certain attributes in the tasting experience by coordinating the audio, the visual, the olfactory parts of the atmosphere. What else do we look at? We look at gastroporn, food porn, a term coined to describe one of Paul Bocuse's cookbooks in the 1970s. And it's something I think we cannot get away from. All of those diners who cannot help but going out to eat and take a picture of their dish before they eat it and then share it with their social networks. 40% of British diners apparently do that today. I have mixologist colleagues in the Middle East who say, you know, it's bizarre, people come into my bar now and they say, I want this. Do you know what it is? Nope. Do you know how much it costs? Nope. What it's called? Nope. Do you even like curacao? Nope. But I want it because I've seen it. It's been shared with my friends. And in that kind of context, maybe chefs there's a danger that chefs are led into appealing to the eye, and perhaps flavour might get forgotten somewhere in the background. Because no one is going to want to take a picture and share it of a bowl of tomato soup, are they? It's got to look amazing on the plate, or the plate itself has to be an amazing thing, such as maybe we see here from one now closed, I think, Israeli restaurant, where you have a little slot in the plate to put your mobile device, so there's no camera wobble. And then you have a curved back to the plate, so you don't get any of those irritating other diners in the shot. It's just your food, perfect every time. Is that the future we're moving towards? How to optimize kind of gastroporn? I think we can't get away from it, given the increase in the number of hours of food TV, of food books in our stores, of food advertising, and given the fact that our brain, our body's most bloodthirsty organ, taking 25% of sort of energy, but only 2% of mass, there is nothing that gets your brain more excited than your favorite food when you're hungry. Not real pornography, not anything else you might be interested in. It's anticipation of food. Once you start eating it, then brain activity goes down. It's the anticipation, the expectation of eating in a hungry state that our brains have perhaps evolved for, and as such, we'll never get away from the food porn. So, what can we do? As a chef, one might want to think, well, you know, I used to be in control of my food images and the way they were shown, the way they were shot in my cookbooks and so on. And now diners are taking their own pictures and putting them up there on social media, and it's kind of great in a way because it gives me lots of free marketing. But how much difference does it really make to the tasting experience? And that was a question we've been addressing with a Franco-Colombian chef, Charles Michel, who's kind of a Colombian chef who wants to change his fellow Colombians' way of thinking about the ingredients from the Amazon, the ingredients from their own country, because no one wants to eat that of a certain class. They all want to eat French or Peruvian or fusion or something else. No one wants to eat Colombian food. And he's sort of thinking about how to transform the way food is presented in order to change his fellow countrymen's beliefs. He's also at that border of between, are chefs artists or not? a debate that goes on and on. Some would say that they are, and if not, why not? And so picture him here in the Museum of Modern Art, staring at Kandinsky's painting 201, which really hangs the other way up. But with a chef's perspective, you can't have a mushroom upside down; it just wouldn't look right. So if you excuse him that liberty of reversing the picture, then Kandinsky here trying to communicate emotion through colour and form. He's thinking, I'm an artist too, as a chef. Can't I do the same thing through colour and form? And makes a rendition of Kandinsky's painting with a 31-element salad served on a canvas, because you are eating a painting after all. Here you sort of see the chef himself, Charles Michel, and us testing it at home in Oxford in something between a proper formal experiment, a restaurant study. We can try out ideas. 12 Kandinsky salads plated up. You've got your eating utensil. This cutlery is maybe kind of boring, so a paintbrush. If you're eating a painting off a canvas, why not? Very sensual on the lips, we find, and just do a good job of picking up the sauce. And there we go. But how much difference does it really make? For that, we take the chef's dish and serve it to 160 people. And with the constraints of 160 people being served at once, you can't go for the full Kandinsky, and the dining rooms won't pay for a bit of painting canvas for each and every diner because you can't reuse them. So we have a simplified Kandinsky salad, or the tossed variant. And of course, the tossed salad, the same ingredients, easier, quicker, lower labour costs. But you can see from diners eating in the same place on the same day, those who are served the Kandinsky-inspired, the aesthetically more pleasing version, were willing to pay more than twice as much for exactly the same food. And then you can figure out, is it worth the labour costs to actually recoup them in the willingness to pay. That's great. So I think artistic plating is important. It does add value to the food, and to the extent that salads are good for us, maybe there's a story about nudging us to eat more of the healthy stuff by making it beautiful to the eye. What else can we do? I think as psychologists interested in the science, we can try and take techniques and tests from elsewhere in psychology and apply them to food. And this is one that we've been using a lot recently, in this case with chef Albert Landgraf, who I've never met, from Sao Paulo in Brazil, who runs a Peace restaurant, young, up-and-coming, top South American 50 restaurant listed. And this is his signature dish, shared all over the world on social media. Beautiful to look at, stunning, and I really like the onions, and they all point away from the diner. We've got a theory about that, and we asked the chef, well, how did you decide to plate that dish in that way? Is it random? Does it change day by day? He'll say, no, I thought about it, I tried a few things out, and that just kind of felt right to me. But given how much this image is shared online, is feeling right to me enough? Maybe not. Maybe I'd want some empirical support to try and know that this is the optimal presentation for that dish. So what we do is we contact people somewhere in the world, anywhere in the world or somewhere in particular, over the internet, and offer them 6 cents. And say, imagine you're going to Albert's restaurant tonight, and you know that thing we sometimes do when plates of food are put down in front of us, we kind of pick it up and just tilt it a little bit. It won't change the taste, but sometimes, like taking ownership or doing something to improve the orientation, we ask you to do that here. When you log in, you'll see the plate spinning, so there's no starting point to anchor you. And just hit the button when the food is in the orientation you would like the dish served. You're going to get 6 cents anyway, so maybe you don't care. Just press the button as fast as you can and on to the next experiment. But it's not like that. It turns out that if we put this online 6 o'clock one day, say, then by the time we finished our first pint of beer, we'll have 250 people responding at $10, $15, peanuts, in a very short space of time. Each dot here is a person with their preferred orientation. Bigger the line of black dots, the more preferred the orientation. A couple of days later, 2,500 people, $100, $200, saying their orientation. They're not responding randomly. Most of those points are around the 12 o'clock. So kind of the chef is intuitively got it right here. He didn't need the science, but it's the method that's there, cheap, quick, that's an important thing. And in fact, he didn't get it quite right, because he said 12 o'clock, and 2,500 people say 3.4 degrees past. So you could pick on that, but anyway. What this allows us to do then is take the chef's dish and play with it, create different kind of orientations, different number of onions, because somewhere in kitchen folklore you're told always plate odd, not even numbers. Does it really matter? Turns out it doesn't. Does it matter which way the onions point? How much would you pay for those different things? It's a virtual kind of a prototyping of a dish. You never get to taste it. We're only interested in your expectations about taste. It's our belief that those expectations about taste and quality anchor the subsequent tasting experience. But maybe I have to do more to convince you this is a useful sort of type of test. I need to convince you that sometimes the chefs do get it wrong. Well, not necessarily get it wrong, but they should think twice about what they're doing. So I couldn't sort of help but notice that many high-end restaurants have started doing asymmetric plating. All the food down one side of the plate, the other side completely blank. And that sort of goes against everything one reads in the painting literature about the aesthetics of painting and of harmony and balance. So sort of, does that really work? Do people really like it? So here we have the results from a ox cheek seasonal winter vegetables, centered or asymmetrically plated. Again, 160 diners, exactly the same food. No real difference in effort here, but a difference in willingness to pay that's probably worth considering. And if I asked you which of those chefs was more creative, you might well say the one on the right is more creative, but that doesn't necessarily correspond into willingness to pay. So then you've got a trade-off. Do you want to be seen as a creative one or maximize your return? No correct answer, but we've got a method to kind of rapidly assess these things. But I should maybe put a note of caution in here to say, I was just telling you about the Provençal rosé paradox and the impact of context and environment. So you might ask, where was that ox cheek served? In fact, you should ask, where was it served? And we can't test it in a restaurant, in the Michelin-starred restaurant, so we test it in somewhere like this, the Somerville College, Oxford Dining Hall. That's got a certain context, that sets a certain expectation. Maybe that's not the sort of place with all the wood panelling and the severe staring principals looking down at you saying, what are you doing? That's not kind of the right atmosphere for asymmetric plating or creative stuff, maybe. But then we're kind of in a challenge. We can't get to the places we want to test necessarily. We have to do the best we can, but always be aware of how the context may play in. And beyond the artistic stuff, I think the whole thing about what plateware is, if there is even a plate at all, as kind of raised by the Kandinsky on a canvas example, is a growing issue. We can see the playfulness in plateware, serving off bricks and tiles and slates and flat caps and hats and so on. That's kind of a way of creating an image that people want to share over social media. But I think also, while you cannot literally taste the plate or the plateware, it can impact the taste of what you have. And so here, work from the Vilaseca Foundation outside Barcelona, serving what is really a strawberry mousse this time. Your eyes do not deceive you. But to about 55 so diners, tested on the same day in the same place, from the same batch of strawberry mousse. They say that this one tastes 7% sweeter, 13% more flavorful, and 9% more liked than exactly the same food served on the black plate instead. This was 2012 when we published this. Now there are 30 published studies of colour and shape of plateware from France, from Newfoundland, from Taiwan, and clearly, in many cases, changing the colour or the shape of the plate, or even its texture, will change what you say about what is on the plate. It's something that's worthy of systematic study. When I was hearing this morning about the second-hand coffee cups in all ranges of colours, I was sort of starting to worry. If you serve the same coffee to people with very different coloured cups, that's going to change the taste a bit. And how do you navigate that? Maybe it's personalised. You can use your own cup colour. I like that colour because it makes my coffee taste a certain way. I don't know, but something I think to think about. And this, what we've just been doing recently is looking for, because we can't design things, so looking for wonderful plateware designs. And this from Luis Vega, which I experienced at Montbar in Barcelona, tapas bar, come restaurant. Beautiful plates that look kind of like a splash in milk, visually stunning. And we sort of show people over the internet, put various foods on these plates and see if there are particular colours or shapes of plates here that will make that chocolate ice cream be expected to be more chocolatey, or the lemon sorbet to taste sweeter to you. find stuff on the line in the cheap studies, and if we find an interesting plate, shape and colour that seems to make a difference to expectations, then bring people into the lab or the restaurant and say, does it really when you are dining? What else have we got? Cutlery, I think, is a big one for us. When you say there's been so much evolution of plating and of plateware over the last few decades, very little in cutlery. Kind of boring. It hasn't changed for a century. And until 2011, there was no ever psychological scientific study of the impact of cutlery on taste or flavour or experience. None, ever. The thing that goes in our mouth so many times a day, and yet no one's ever studied it. It's the stuff that's low-hanging fruit that I think is so important. And again, it sort of starts for us at home in Oxford at a lab dinner party with my wife's silver service, and Chef Charles Michel has gone to the market, got the hares, put the hare's pelt on the handle, and I can still remember the hare stew we were served that night, the smell of the animal on the spoon. I can guarantee you there were no empty plates left, that's for sure. You knew where your meal was coming from, and you respected it accordingly. I think things like that sort of evolved into things like this, which is the spoon you get at the final course of the revamped Fat Duck restaurant experience. And again, just like the food, when you see it, you have an expectation about taste. When you see a spoon, you have an expectation about effort. How much effort would I have to put in to lift that spoon off? But you'd be wrong, because it's got lead weights in it. It's heavier than you expect. So when you get things that are heavier than you expect, it makes stuff taste better. And again, we have the research from a Scottish restaurant. People serve the same food with heavy cutlery, rate it as better than light. It's also textured, another nice Marinetti futurist touch from his tactile dinner parties, and it has fragrance in there as well. Truly multi-sensory bit of stuff. Of course, maybe we're not going to have that in the stores anytime soon, I don't think. And maybe this is the chef's design rather than a designer's design. So how things are going to go mainstream? I think there's a really interesting sort of tension here between these one-off examples from the design schools or from the chefs or others of interesting cutlery that will not make it to the mainstream. And then to actually make a mainstream new item of cutlery, I guess minimum run is 750. So that's kind of an expensive investment for somebody. So we sort of like spoons like this from Studio William in the UK, beautifully textured spoons that are available in the supermarkets that you wouldn't mind having on your dinner table, that do have different textures, surprise on the bottom one under your tongue, dimples, ripples, lines. They were done intuitively by the silversmith, beating out the metal, sticking it on his tongue, saying, that's interesting. I think we'll make some of those. But we're just currently trying to do the research with the chef to see whether there are certain flavours, tastes that go best on that thing. So that's 3 or 4 minutes that I have. I just want to mention sound again. I want to say how things that start in the high end, places like the Fat Duck, which I think is a great innovative space, the top kitchens of today, can percolate down to the mainstream. And this is one way it did in the House of Wolf, a €60 a head menu in London, a 5-course multi-sensory tasting menu, 1 course for each sense, and it's the sound course at the bottom, the sonic cake pop. And now rather than the chef and the restaurant bringing the technology to the table for you, I say take the technology out of your pocket and use it in a way to enhance the taste of the food. And here we have a diner in the restaurant eating their chocolate lolly. You can just about hear the brrr. This was one of 2 telephone tracks they could hear. If you dialed 0845 on your mobile device, 648 something something something, you got this track. If you dialed a different number on your mobile device, you got this track instead. And one of those 2 tracks has been designed to bring out sweetness, one to bring out bitterness. Well, not literally sweet or bitter, but when we ask tens, hundreds, thousands of people in the West or in the East, that tinkling high-pitched sound is sweet to the majority of people, and it brings out 5 to 10% sweetness in the dish. So we've gone from the very high end to the mainstream kind of, and with the technology that's in your own pocket. And where after that, well, maybe it goes to places like this, the Gin Cafe in Vietnam, a cafe that plays permanently sweet music in the cafe so they can reduce the amount of sugar in the food and the pastries that they serve. Nice idea. Does sonic seasoning work in the long term? I don't know. I know it works for an hour a day, maybe a week, but longer. We'd want to know that before you invested too much in someone like this. I'll just leave you with are sort of more recent examples of the sound. We've got the sounds of sweet, the sounds of bitter. We've also got the sound of creamy. This is Dominic Pasune, chocolate maker to the rock stars in his chocolate line. In his chocolate shops in Belgium, in Belgian museums, you can take a chocolate, play this music, and that chocolate, very high quality chocolate, will taste creamier, sweeter, maybe more liked than if you listen to this and said, this is not creamy music. And it's kind of a bit of scientific research in the lab to begin with, then a sound designer who makes the sound tracks and then brought back together with a creative of the chocolate space here to... and we've got sweet music, sour music, creamy music, spicy music, bitter music, and so the list goes on now, maybe even umami music, and it can be used to season food in ways that are fun in a restaurant, but that may also play out in the long term in the thing. And so I'll just leave you with this, which is just a few of the examples of this sort of technology at table. We started with the sound of the sea and the fact that we've made it kind of ubiquitous with handheld technologies in your pocket to add seasoning to food. Then what does the future hold? Maybe it's things like this, the augmented reality sushi that my colleague Katsuo Okajima has been working on in Japan. When the seas have been fished to extinction of all your favorite sushi fish, put the headset on and with a blink of your hand, you can change the sushi meat, its rendition, its sheen, its texture, its kind of hard texture to reproduce, and you can pick up that sushi and then put it in your mouth, bite into it, and the illusion will still hold. And the question is, does it taste like the fish on the right that it looks like, or the fish on the left that it actually is? And then finally, I think that's interesting, futuristic, can be done, but I don't think any diner at home, maybe not even in a restaurant, is going to put a virtual reality headset on in order to experience food. Much more likely, I think, is again, it's the technology we already have at home, at our disposal. It costs nothing. Integrated into home dining experiences, be it with the dining off a tablet, like at Andreas Caminada's restaurant in the bottom left, an ironic take, serving what looks a food dish off what looks like a white plate. So why bother with a tablet? Kind of exploring the space, having fun, seeing what works, or something like the sound of the sea brought to the home environment when you eat the seafood off the plate you see there. These things are dishwasher proof, or at least waterproof, so why not? Eat off your tablet, stick it in the dishwasher, and away you go. We'll see. Maybe that's not the answer, but I think we'll find the answer. It will be from these the real innovative space of these chefs taking the technology, taking the science, trying new things with it, seeing what works, what sticks, what doesn't. And that's what really excites me about the space, is that in contrast to other industries that takes years or decades to implement any change, a chef, if they're interested in this, will put it on the menu next week. And you have real diners paying real money for real food. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. That innovation happens much quicker there, and I really believe there are good examples now of what started in the high-end, exclusive, esoteric and expensive restaurants has percolated down to the mainstream in a way that it never would have done if you went straight to the mainstream and said, try this. So they'd kind of laugh you out of the room. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Now it will be, the questions will be at the end, after the presentation of Heloise. The next presentation is titled Transversal Creativity at El Cellar de Can Roca by Heloise Vilaseca. Just wait a minute for the connections.
Good afternoon. So my name is Heloise Vilaseca. I'm coming from El Celler de Can Roca, and generally people are expecting these guys. So I'm sorry about that, because I came. And what I'm coming to talk about, it's about transversal creativity. But before, I think we talk about the context, and it's important to talk about the context. And the three brothers are coming from a small neighborhood close to Girona, and have been working together for at least 30 years, opening this restaurant, which is today very well known, and is doing one kind of gastronomy that may interest you in terms of food design and food studies. That's why I'm here today to explain a little bit more about what is the creativity and this transversal creativity at El Celler de Can Roca. But El Celler, it's also about the team. Someone this morning talked about the fact that it was important to involve the team into the process, because this is a very well-known refrain, but I think it's important to talk about it. If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And I'm talking about transversal creativity because the restaurant has grown in many different business areas. We have the restaurant, we have the catering part, we have the ice cream brand, and we have La Masía. What is La Masía? La Masía is this small house at the end of the food garden, and it's called La Masía y más R. It was a little bit of mistake, because it should have been R&D, or I plus D. But I did a French, Catalan, Spanish, English mistake, and I put I más R, because you can interpret it. Imagination, ideation, investigation, innovation. R, of course, mean restaurant, Roca, but also roots. And we are talking about all that because we're talking about creativity and creative lines and where the creativity come from. First, a little example of what we do in La Masía, if that works. No. And play. This is the restaurant. As you can see, it's a 1-minute walk from La Masia. But going deeper into what is creativity for us and what are our line of creativity, there is, I think, 16 different creativity area that inspire us. I will try to explain some of them and to bring you some example of how we apply it in a restaurant. Of course, we don't have time for the 16s, so I will pick some of them. The first one, and I think it's the first that comes to your mind when you think about food, is memory. That's bring you back to what you love, what you loved once, or maybe what you will love next time you will eat. I'm going to show you a small example of what is memory for the three brothers.
Nuestro verdadero pasado se oculta fuera de los límites de la inteligencia, en un insospechado objeto material, en la sensación que ese objeto material nos despierta. Que nos encontremos con ese objeto antes de que nos llegue la muerte, o que no lo encontremos nunca, depende del azar.
The three brothers used to work in their restaurant, the parent restaurant, and each one brings to their own restaurant one tapas that come from their memory. In case of Giuseppe, the sommelier, he has this memory of being behind the bar and being tasting all the drinks behind the bar. And he creates a bonbon of Campari that is melting in your mouth. For Joan, the chef, he has this memory of his grandmother, who was the chef, who bring him bread and meat between the breads. But at the end of the meal, what was left over, he was using it. And for Jody, the sweet one, her aunt used to work at the Nestle company just close by and was always bringing this red box of chocolate. So he creates the big chocolate bonbon. Their case, authenticity is that. It's their authenticity. What is now one of the first snack
El
of the
olor y el
restaurant.
sabor perduran mucho más y soportan sin doblegarse en su impalpable gotita el edificio enorme del recuerdo.
Is this plate, the bar. They bring the bar to the table. They bring where does it come from to explain, to tell a story of them being playing in the bar. Jody was very small, so he's up there in the in the moon. And I'm going to explain you another example. You all know what is the smell of an old book. This old book sensation, going to a library, no library. And we did a work of getting this flavor, taking away the flavor of the old book to have this small shot of old book splashing in your mouth. But why? Technology is useless if it's only for technology. And there is a reason. Obviously, there is always a reason to create a new dish, and there is always a story behind. We've been on a tour for the last 3 years, and when we've been traveling in Chile, and we wanted to make a dish in honor to Pablo Neruda. There is in this dish we wanted to make Oda al Caldillo de Congrio, which is a poem, a nice poem of Pablo Neruda. And this comes back to another line of creativity. And we did a dish. It was fantastic. It was an interpretation of El Caldillo de Congrio, which is a stock of fish based on the poem of Pablo Neruda. And we bring it to the table. We try, we taste it, trial and error. That's what we do in a kitchen. But people really didn't get it. What was the link with Pablo Neruda? We had to do another trial and research a little bit more. And we thought about putting the small part of the poem in the plate, on a paper, on an edible paper. But this paper has to be, at the same time, bringing you to the memory of old book. So we have a small drop of this old book flavor on the corner of this paper on your dish. And then it came a real information for the commensal. And because plate, dish, and creativity is not something stepped in stone, it always evolves. We did another version, not on this stock, but on a pastry dish. We did el mil hojas, millefeuille, and this is a dessert of Jordi with a cream of tea and the paper with the flavor. And this is another version of how you can evolve. Kitchen is about evolution. Cooking is evolution all the time in experimentation. If I'm going to talk about the landscape, I have to talk about the project, which is called Terra Animada. It's a project where we were looking into all the plants that are surrounding Girona in the restaurant. And we did a research on all the plants around and gather all the information how to forage natural Sylvester plant that some of them are already used and others are forgotten. And we try to implement it in a restaurant to take advantage of our surrounding. But taking advantage of our surrounding is not only looking about the landscape, looking a little bit closer, looking into the bottled glass that we throw away every day. Every day at the restaurant there is 100 bottles of wine, distilled product, or water that are thrown away. And we did a project on how to recycle or reuse. And we developed tools, elements. We start thinking about the dish in another way. This bottle now is used for holding some chocolates we give at the end of the dinner and goes with the wine that was actually coming from this bottle. It's also a way to link. And I think one of the dishes that is very much a holistic way of seeing the creative process of El Seyer is la calzotada. It's a very traditional meal that is taken in the spring in Catalonia, when I think it's well explained. You eat this spring onion on the barbecue, and we did our own version. Talking about chromatism, we just talked about color. We talked about the influence of the color. Jordi, a long time ago, has been working on color, and he has this idea of some color can bring you some emotions. Maybe you're more exciting if you take something more citric. Maybe you're more sad if you take something a little bit more plain. But the latest project he's been working is about el tocaplat, the play dish. It's about how a music, color, but also a dish, a plate can feel.
Si tuviera que definir el celler en un color, sería el naranja. Es el color de la humanidad.
Bueno, este es uno de los 4 cromatismos que tenemos en casa. Está el rojo, el verde, el blanco y el naranja, que es este. Y bien, para mí la revolución en la cocina está en conectar los sentidos con las emociones. Como puede ser en este plato, pues hay elementos del mismo color, que es el naranja en este caso, en el que hay zanahoria, mandarina, calabaza, azafrán, flores.
En sus platos hay una predominancia del fa sostenido que yo percibo como un tipo de naranja. Escuchar colores ha cambiado totalmente la forma en que percibo la vida.
Poder comer colores o perfumes son 2 líneas de investigación que llevamos trabajando desde el 2004.
Hasta los 21 años pintaba, componía y vivía en escala de grises. No podía ver los colores.
Basábamos el trabajo sobre el cromatismo en la correspondencia que hay entre las emociones y los colores. Y ahora con Neil le hemos dado más complejidad al concepto para ir más allá de un color.
Antes de 2004 no podía percibir ningún color, pero ahora puedo percibir todos los colores visibles e incluso colores que van más allá del ojo humano, como los infrarrojos y los ultravioletas. La antena percibe las frecuencias de luz y entonces un chip dentro de mi cabeza me permite escuchar el sonido de las frecuencias de luz. Por lo tanto, la relación color-sonido no es arbitraria. Me llamo Neil Harbison y soy un cyborg.
We built this plate where there is technology behind, and because of the color it creates a sound, so we can play a song with the food itself. You can imagine a room of 100 people playing his own song. It was difficult for your hearing, but it was experimental, and we're still working on it, because creativity in our case doesn't mean that we always have success. We need to try and go beyond the limits. Perfume. Jordi just quoted the perfume. Perfume is and has always been a very inspiring line for Jordi, who has been doing adaptation of perfume in their plates. And we did in the latest year we did an adaptation for the cheap dessert, and we take the extraction of the sheep flavor. You will have the possibility to smell right now. Maybe not the best or the more delightful flavor, but I will explain why I'm giving you that. I'm giving you that so you can, if you can't come to the El Celler today or now, I'll try to bring you to the table one moment, one instant. And I will explain you one dish, one dessert of Jordi. who is made on sheep milk, in which he's working with different technique. One is about doing a caramel, very delicate caramel, blown. The dish is called lactic. We do algodón de azúcar, barba papa, to create the sheep structure, the view. And on the dish there is a dulce de leche of sheep, mango, sheep cream, sheep foam. It's a little bit repetitive, I'm sorry about that, but this is a dish. The ice cream, another part of the foam. Mango croquant. And the sheep on top. And the caramel broken. And because of the form of the plate, we have the feeling to be in the land. And we also bring this smell to the table with this nose, so you can feel really being there. Innovation. Innovation can be all that I explained before. In that case, we were talking about technology more, and all the scientist technology that can be used in the kitchen. Equipment tools, design plates, dehydrator in that case, immersion circulator, very stable oven, humidity control storage, cooking, vapor. The dryer. Cracking smoke in a cream. Super cooling process. Electric smoke pipe. This is a technology we will develop, but we still don't know how to plate, what to plate in it. So if you have an idea, please. I just want to add a dish that is a collaboration with actually these things that happen in your life when you meet someone who knows someone, and that is part of the transversality. We have the son of the artist who did this fantastical plate, who designed the plate actually, and it was thinking about how to bring a snack for astronauts on the moon, but this is a totally other story. So if you want to ask it after, I can tell you. And I will end with one which is very much important, and we never have to forget about it, which is sense of humor, because it's an experience. And in our case, in the restaurant, in El Señor de Can Roca, sense of humor maybe goes a little bit more along the dessert part, because it's more the sense of how Jordi is, but it's important. And in that case, I will explain not a dessert from El Señor, but dessert from the other line, the line that goes to the general public, to the ice cream brand. Jordi has developed a certain number of these popsicles that are from his own nose, because it was very likely to have people lip his nose. But also we did different adaptation for all the city where the rocambolesque open, and always the flavor of the ice cream has to be with the city, obviously. And one which is pretty fun to explain in another video. He's saying, I'm your father, obviously. So we have all this line that some of them, the nose is in the restaurant. Because you never have to forget that we are a child, and when we go for an experience, or at least the expectation that people are waiting for a year coming to our restaurant is very high. And we have to make them laugh at the beginning, at the end, at some point. And I was here to talk about transversal creativity, so I will end about transversal creativity. I explain you several examples of dishes, plates, and creative process we're going through. And this is thankful to the full organization of people that are surrounding a restaurant. From the perfumer, someone in charge of multimedia, product designer, product management, scientist, fermentation expert. But the one who is not in that depot is the chef. And I'm wondering, is there any chef in the room? That's a good question. I was supposed to be the chef. Well, the three brothers were supposed to come. But would be great to have them involved in that process here in that conference. And I don't know if the chefs are doing food design or if they are applying food studies. I don't know. We're doing what we do for giving the best experience the perfect meal, if you let me take your words. We're trying to do the perfect meal in our context, with our memories, and for the people who have their own background, their own countries, Chinese living in Milan, Italian living in California, French living in Catalonia. It's not that easy. There is a lot of different characteristics taken into account, but we have to have fun and has this cross-modal interaction between people to have a transversal creativity. Thank you.
I'm hungry, so thank you very much. I invite both keynotes to the table, please. So, do you have any questions? None. Okay.
Hi, so thank you for two great presentations. I think my question is probably to Mr. Spence, firstly. Have you done, I mean, it seems you're very much involved in sort of high-end cuisine mostly. I mean, have you also, I mean, because very interesting results you come up with. I mean, have you also investigated using these sort of methods also, I mean, more, I mean, other contexts? I mean, for instance, I mean, there are many problems with, for instance, undernourishments and stuff. I mean, have you taken outside this sort of arena? That would be really interesting to hear about.
Yes, and there's a whole chapter in the book on hospital food, which the editor took out because it was too depressing. They wanted a good, happy story, so hospital food is put me in the wrong mind. So that was out. It has appeared elsewhere, and I do think we've been trying for a decade to get money to do studies in hospitals around food. Never succeeded, never. But finally doing one with the Vilaseca Foundation and a cancer hospital in Children's Cancer Hospital just outside Barcelona now, finally. And I think lots of the things that you see in the high end, so for everything from plate colour, that we first looked at with the Vilaseca, there are now studies out showing that in those undernourished hospital patients who may find it difficult in later years to discriminate the food from the plate, so they don't know what they're eating, if you put in high contrast plateware, you can increase consumption by a third in the hospitals, in the patients, and that can then follow through to shorter hospital stays, and so saving of money. Everything from actually the Sound of the Sea, it turns out, between F.T. Marinetti and ourselves in the 1970s, in some psychiatric hospitals in the States, they were playing the Sound of the Sea to calm agitated psychiatric patients, and by so doing encourage them to eat more and better. So I think there are a number of connections there, and I'm now seeing some of the some very innovative hospitals kind of competing in the experience design space. So there's one in France, palliative care hospital for the end of life, where they realise the importance of proper cutlery, and they have their patients in the last few days or weeks eating for proper cutlery, and the nurses changing into French outfits because that's part of the experience, and thinking about the sort of commensality and the sharing of that moment, and having a bar. I mean, why shouldn't you have a drink in the last few days with family? And so I think there are people who are starting to do some great things, but to actually go in there in the first place in the hospital, it's so difficult to get the ethical approval and agreement of all interested parties that start somewhere else and say it works there, and then maybe they've got a reason to believe and to take you up. And if some of the world's top chefs are doing this, then they think maybe we could try that as well.
Yeah, interesting.
So thanks for the talks, and follow up on the astronaut dish on the moon, I guess. It's an easy question.
We went to Houston during our tour 2 years ago, and we had the chance to meet an astronaut who lived 6 months up there in the international, and we talked about the food, which is pretty depressing, as much as the hospital, I guess. And he told us that it would be great to have something on the dish, and we had to stop the project because there is a lot of bureaucracy, as in an hospital, differently, but also as complicated. But we thought about what an astronaut is missing more when he is up there, and we come to the idea that is Earth, and that's why we start working on a funny ice cream earthy dessert made of distilled earth and presented with a grass bowl because he has to be ergonomic. He has to go up there. We forgot that the ice cream doesn't go on an ice cream well, whatever. We worked around it. And we come at the end with a very interesting part of the dessert that you've seen on the screen, which is called the rainy forest. And at the same time we were developing that, we went step by step and we ended by mistake giving a new creative dessert for the restaurant and not for the NASA.
I have two questions. One for because you never for Spencer, because you didn't talk about the environment in the restaurant, for if it's comfy and, for instance, the light, because you have the traditional or old school restaurants usually are very low on light and the new trends are more bright. So is that which trend should we follow, or if it really has an impact on the meal? And the other question is about how long do you take to create a dish like that? Okay, so two different questions.
So I guess if you go back to the sort of 1970s, the view was that we should be trying to recreate kind of the cave meal when it was dark and you just had the fire and hence a candle with low lighting and no view outside. With the curtains up, and that does, as you say, seem to have very much changed in recent years with lighter or brighter, less of the soft furnishings and hence more of the noise causing problems. And I think those light levels and comfort is going to be kind of a hard one, I suppose, to measure or manipulate in a sort of systematic manner. But there is research out there showing both. You know, as the room lighting goes up, then you will tend to order spicier dishes, for example. That you can change people's enjoyment or how much they drink coffee by brightness. We and others have stuff on the hue of the lighting as being as a factor through the softness of your chair. There's some research just out from Taiwan looking at those who are sitting on a hard chair, which you elected to sit on, will rate spicy tofu as significantly spicier than those who have a nice cushioned seat underneath. So all aspects are up for grabs, from the lighting, from the music, from the chair. And one tends to maybe identify it as individual things you can sort of study. So just study the chair, and somebody else just studies the lighting brightness, and somebody else just studies the hue. And then somebody thinks, okay, what happens if we combine the lighting with the music? Then what? And things get more and more complicated, so less can be done, but a few things are.
And about the time of a creation of a new dish, it's difficult to answer. It can be a minute, generally not. It can be months. It can be. We generally create in a chaos. So what I explained today is the more organized we have with the 16 lines of creative inspiration. But after that, explaining that, we gather, we think about a dish. Everyone goes in his place doing his part, and then we gather again. And 2 months ago, we have this stepstone. No. We can have a dish, think and thought for months, and have a perfect dish, this perfect dish that everyone wants to have, but we don't have the good customer for that. Because it doesn't fit in our restaurant. Because it's fantastic, but doesn't fit with the philosophy. Or otherwise it's a perfect dish, but then there is not this meat on the market because it's not seasonal anymore. So you have to wait the next year. And then when the next year arrives, and you try again the dish, you don't like it. Because you have a year more. And because you never know, it depends on your mood. There is so many factors. But it's trial and error, and chef work on pressure. So sometimes you don't have any other than find a new dish. But generally what we do is, it's on the go. When the dish is good, when the three brothers like it, when it fits on the menu because it fits with the wine that goes before, in the middle, and after. Because maybe your dish is fantastic, but doesn't have the place because there is no wine for going for it. Or because you have to repeat wine, so you have to wait because no, you can't repeat wine. So there is no good answer of that, but I guess I give you a little bit of light.
Great.
Could I ask how? Some dishes created. You think it tastes great? What sort of? Is it just the three brothers? If they all say aye, that's it, or is there a committee, or do you test it out on some diners first to see how they respond, or is there some process to get from that?
Yeah, it definitely has to be liked by the three brothers, because it's a global, it's kind of a magic triangle, and it has to fit in a menu of a magic triangle, and generally yes, we have these people that we want to taste it, and we had the feedback, and we try again, and sometimes no, it's just so wonderful, so there is no risk, or we like it. It's not that there is no risk, but they want to risk it, because there's always a risk. Because as you said, if someone comes and he has a very bad day, you have to make a lot of effort in the front of the house work to get them to like your dish, even if it's fantastic. So there is this team of creativity team, the three brothers, the three R&D chef, the team of La Masia. We all kind of try. We don't have all to agree on the dish, the three brothers, and then we try sometimes from some people. Yeah.
Any more? Yeah. Now I need to choose which one. Let's try in the back. So this needs to be the last question because of the schedule.
A question to Charles. You talked about how expectation is such a great part of the enjoyment of a meal. And in the beginning of your talk, you also mentioned how many of experiments are made with among a similar segment, so middle class, white, Western people. In your experience, have you encountered differences in how big a part this anticipation is in the dining experience or in the eating experience, and perhaps if there are differences in which senses are more important depending on the culture or the region? Yeah.
It becomes difficult in practice to go out and test with real foods populations in different parts of the world, so very occasionally we do that. More often it's easier if you just test the expectations about a dish, the anticipation, because then you can do it perhaps over the internet for some number of things. And so now we have started running up to 8 country studies from South America to North to Asia to India to Europe, to look for commonalities and differences in the expectations and willingness to pay that are set by different plating arrangements and different plateware. So, for example, we just published one looking at noodles or pasta served on sort of plateware typical of your white plate versus a metal, like a dog bowl, looks like to me, but common in China, and look at how those things set different expectations and people are willing to pay. So that research is starting to roll out. And there you think probably whoever you are and wherever you're born, the brain will combine the senses in the same sort of way, but the trigger, that pink ice cream might mean strawberry in many parts of the world, but maybe there are some countries where that red colour sets the expectation of something else. So the kind of link, we're all maybe visually dominant, we always see food first, and we all, whoever we are, set expectations from what we see, but there are some cultural differences in the expectation set by a particular colour, or maybe by a particular fragrance being paired with sweet or savoury dishes in the East versus the West. But you do find also in surprising kind of commonalities. So in the musical case, we have this music that's sweet or bitter, sour or salty, created based on the weirdos in Oxford, then soundtracks created by German sound designers. But then when we test it in North America or India with a very different musical repertoire, we find that the Indian participants are able to decode the taste to virtually the same level despite the fact they have different backgrounds. So sometimes you find universalities, sometimes differences, and kind of almost however it turns out. Then maybe if there are differences, you think, well, maybe if I know the country from which my diners are coming tonight to that table number 3, then you can start doing things that are perhaps personalised and exciting. And if it becomes a universal, then that becomes kind of maybe more exciting to the theoretical side, maybe.
Thank you.
So let's thank both of our keynotes. We need to end this part of the session. Thank you very much. Now the parallel sessions will begin here and in the other room. Thank you very much.
Well, hello everyone. I'm Claudia. I'll be moderating this session. And I will also be presenting together with my colleague, Maria José, and Ricardo, who's somewhere, the first presentation.